Right, hello. So this is my first longer video that I'm gonna make with in this longer form, like a podcast or I don't know how it's called. I don't want to assign any kind of official title. Like my channel is called What I Think, and I never ever actually planned like to post anything major on this channel. So but since now I just kind of got into the mood of recording, and yesterday I was going from my classes of when I'm learning some of the language, and I got really into thinking about, hey, maybe I should do this kind of recording, because as always, whenever I was doing these sit reps about the war in Ukraine, it always felt for me that there was so many things that I just kind of left unsaid, but I still would like to say them, and I would like to think about this, like not think about this, but I would like to express what I think about that, because very oftentimes I kind of put my hand on the brakes, put my feet on the brakes rather that, about the fact that I shouldn't go too much into speculation, because I want to keep the sit reps more focused around what's the actual experts that are saying about the war, because as much as I would like to tell how the things are gonna turn out, I'm no military expert and I don't have the expertise, but there is still a lot of the ideas and thoughts in my head that I want to share with. I mean, not necessarily share, because I don't really expect a lot of people to listen to this. But if you are, well, thanks. Leave a comment. Let's talk it over, because I think the productive discussion, and I hope then to use that to maybe make additional videos, audios. But yeah, after thinking about this, I've came home. I even got the video editing tool to actually put some kind of a background stream for this recording, so that I can put something that is more interesting than just looking at the map for the whole time. I haven't really used it, so excuse me for being amateurish about this. But other than that, it's just a more exciting way for me to interact with what I want to do. So I've wrote myself a little bit of like an outline for the main points that I want to talk about that are actual to the situation in Ukraine right now. And the first big things, obviously, that come out in news recently is the Mariupol. Right, so let's talk about that. So the Azov Battalion and a lot of the police forces, a lot of the border guard forces and volunteers like territorial defense units and so on, and a lot of other people have been holding the Azov steel plant for a while now. It's been a major part of Ukraine's operations, and I'm pretty sure that all in all, it prevented a lot of the Putin's plans to come to fruition. Because at its peak, Mariupol just by itself was diverting over 20,000 troops, including obviously vehicles and artillery and air power, away from the fighting around the north side when there was a siege around Kiev and Kharkiv. And this obviously was extremely important. So the job and the military purpose of the military achievement that the guys at Mariupol did is hard to overstate. It's because it really helped. Like, I'm pretty sure you can say that what happened in Mariupol saved Ukraine in big parts. And with that said, why are now then they giving away if they were doing so much? Well, the obvious point is they were doing. That's the past tense. By now, most of the Mariupol is taken, and most of the troops have already left to fight on the front lines. Right now, they are basically being pinned down by a constant fire. And while they are still diverting maybe a couple of thousand of Russian troops and some of the air assets that are dropping bombs and, well, ships, they're not really being diverted because they don't really have a lot of things to do anyway. So why wouldn't they just be shooting at the Azov still? So it's not really helping the common war effort. So their job was basically done by now. And I think for a longer time, Zelensky and everyone else on the Ukrainian side was looking for a way out of this situation, how they can get people out of there safely without trying to do basically what they're doing now. They were trying to influence Putin in many other ways, trying to find any kind of leeway for them to, if not join Ukrainian army, then at least being taken by the third country that would then prohibit them to return to the battlefield. And the obvious answer is that all those efforts failed. So by now, the Azov still, as far as I'm aware, there is not a lot of news about it because Ukrainian side doesn't really want to talk about it that much. Russians are obviously gloating because they put this as this big, amazing win, because that's what propaganda does. And more importantly, they are trying to basically make an exchange, and this might be harder than it is expected. So one of the main things that Putin said when he started this war is that the fact that Ukraine is run by Nazis. So I really truly believe that he might believe so, or if he doesn't believe so, then a lot of people around him believe so. And Azov, I'm pretty sure here in the West we also are very much aware that the Azov Battalion is very often linked to the neo-Nazis. It is not completely true, right? So, because yes, while kind of the ideological component of Azov that was started around even pre-2014, it did grow from neo-Nazis, which is not very nice to say the least. I think neo-Nazis are not good in any context. But obviously, a lot of them are also patriots. And what happened is, in 2014, since there was no Ukrainian army back then, so there was no like a kind of service-ready check, a lot of the armed forces were made up of basically volunteers and these paramilitary contractors that had sometimes, or even very often, shady background. I know we talk a lot about the Azov Battalion as the one that's being represented with neo-Nazis, but there have been battalions that turned out to be extremely, for example, built basically as a criminal gangs, right? And they were committing like serious war crimes, right? They were robbing people, they were taking the stuff away, they were doing horrendous things on the Ukrainian side, and this is very fair. However, Ukraine did address a lot of those questions after the 2014 active war phase, right? A lot of these criminal battalions, right, they have been prosecuted, they have been found guilty, and a lot of them have been put in jail. And Azov Battalion, basically, while not disbanded, it was acknowledged to be part of the Ukraine's military forces. So it's part of the Ukrainian army now. And a lot of the ideological background has been scaled down significantly in the Azov Battalion. So now there is more built on patriotism than some kind of a Nazi ideology. And a lot of this waving around saying, yes, but Azov are Nazis, is mostly just Russian propaganda. But that is where also the negative side comes in, is the fact that they are now giving themselves to the mercy of the Russian occupiers. This means that the Azov Battalion, they want to exchange, Ukrainians want to exchange the Azov battalions as a captured soldiers, and they want to exchange it for captured Russian soldiers. The problem is that for Russian side, this is almost a principal position to capture and prosecute and humiliate Azov Battalion soldiers, because they are the prime Nazis of the Ukrainian Reich, as they would love to put it. So it is unclear if the transition of the Azov soldiers will be possible to the Ukrainian side. Right now it kind of hangs in the air. But the most important part is that while this is tragic and their destiny now lies in the hands of complete inhumane forces by being Russian Federation, because I'm expecting that they're awaiting torture, They were awaiting humiliation, awful conditions. Basically, it is going to be really bad. It is going to be really bad for them, and there is no joking around this. And for example, Russians might say, we're going to give them to you, but we're going to make them permanent disabled, right? They might chop off the legs or arms, or both legs and arms, for all of the soldiers, like they're technically going to stay alive. It's just they're like, well, we had to essentially look at them, and now all of them are, cripples. That is a possibility, right? So, and obviously a lot of torture they might cut off ears, arms, everything might happen. Like, come on, it's Russia. Like they did this in Bucha and everywhere just because it was fun, right? If they don't care about killing people, why would they care about chopping off some of the limbs from the actual Nazis, as they put it? So it's an extremely dire situation for Azov. I'm not sure if there is any proper negotiations there between Russians and Ukrainians, but I hope so, because they are a part of the Ukrainian army, and they are heroes of Ukraine by now, because on them this war effort might not have been as strong for the Ukrainian side as it was, and it still is. And this brings us to the second point, the point of Kharkiv. So right now, Ukraine is taking it on the offensive around Kharkiv. They're pushing the Russian forces out of Ukraine, and which actually firstly signifies a very important milestone. By this point, Ukraine has kicked Russia out of more territories that they came into Ukraine than Russia was able to capture during this campaign. So basically, Ukraine, in just a scale of land, is already kind of overtaking Russia. I know obviously that it's still Ukrainian land, so while it all is not free, that doesn't really matter. But this definitely signifies a lot. It's a very symbolic effort. And Kharkiv is a lot bigger blow, so even though final victory of Mariupol might not actually matter that much, just because they're losing Kharkiv, because they're losing threat of Kharkiv. It is hard to understate just how much this means for the Russians. Kharkiv was always expected, firstly, not to resist at all. It was expected always that the city will just kind of fall into the laps of the Russians. If Kiev is kind of like, probably not, then Kharkiv was always considered to be like, well, this is a almost pretty much Russian city, right? So why would we even bother sending any troops? Let's just send, like a couple of guys there and they will surrender. And Kharkiv region was very, very much important for Russians. The fact that they couldn't capture Kharkiv, right? It brought a lot of anger for the Russians. That's why the shelling of Kharkiv was so dire. That's why they shelled Kharkiv so much day in, day out, just because they had this frustration that even their city that's supposed to belong to them, because Russia, it's imperial, it's like, it's supposed to belong to me, it's my clay, but it didn't budge a bit. And now Kharkiv has been liberated. This is a huge moral defeat for Russians, and obviously this is another brick in the wall for the Russian moral defeat, right? Because that campaign that is happening can only go as long as the Russian population supports it. And we all need to kind of take off some of the glasses. I know this is a common thing I hear in the West. Like, every time I go to work or try to explain this war to someone else at my workplace, it always comes down to, well, but the Russians are not supporting this. This is only Putin and like some of his closest things. And I try to explain to them, well, you see, no, not really, because Putin is kind of the product of the Russian population in pretty much the same way that Russian population is the product of Putin. So it was very much a two-sided effort, right? Because we might understand that Russian, think about it this way, Russian population made a deal with the devil, if you believe in such things. But I'm just using it as a folklore reference, not a religious one. So Russia essentially, in 1996 or 95, I might be off by the years, there was a war in Chechnya, where the Russian region of Chechnya wanted to secede, as with others did, from the Soviet Union. But the Russian Russian government decided not to. At that moment, basically, the similar situation as with Ukraine happened, right? There was some military hawks that said to the president by then, Boris Yeltsin, that Chechnya will be pacified easily and without blood within a couple of days, and it will be an easy campaign. What ended up happening was a miserable defeat by the Russians, and they lost basically the first Chechen War, right? But the secession didn't complete fully, unfortunately. And what happened is the second Chechen War that was basically started by Putin, that said, I will solve this for you Russian people. I will bring Chechnya into fold with Russian Federation. And this is the deal that the Russian population back then did. Instead of having the democracy and allow other nations to determine themselves, they said, no, it's ours. We're not going to give it to you. Whatever the population that lives there wants, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if it was a republic on its own. It doesn't matter if they have their own culture. It is us. And obviously Russians, they have a completely different view. They have about 1,001 different justification of why it wasn't like this, that it was all fine. But the second Chechen War, which Chechnya lost, was an extremely brutal campaign where basically Russians destroyed everything. And forgive me for not knowing a lot of details, but what it settled is that the Russians accepted that this is okay. And this was basically them signing with the blood, unfortunately not their blood. It was a blood of Chechens on their hands, that they put those bloody hands on the line that is dotted to underscore that this is okay. Then we had the 2008 Georgia campaign, where Russians basically said, okay, we're fighting and taking this part of the land, and there is a lot of, and they said, okay, it's fine. Then obviously 2014, again, a lot of population said that this is fine, right? The Crimea is ours now. And now we come to 2022. And what I want you to understand is that the Russian population lives in this dream. It's a dream where they kind of know deep down that they are thieves and they are essentially the bad guys, right? But they are playing pretend as a democratic country. They're playing pretend that they have laws. They're playing pretend as this is all okay, that Russia has an unstoppable machine, and they are playing pretend that they are doing good and it was justified for them to enter Ukraine. But this play pretend is what it is. It is just a pretend game, right? Deep down, they do know that. And the fact that they do know that terrifies the shit out of them. Because if they would say, okay, yes, this was not justified, that means that they would have to basically agree that back then they signed that bloody contract, that even if those were not the people that were, pretty much alive back then, or even chose Putin, because Putin obviously has been there for a long time, but there were people, and the Russian society basically made that agreement, and they lived through that agreement. They didn't try to break it all these years, because this was an escalating problem. So for Russians now, they want to believe, they want to be, lied to have this dream scenario where they are the besieged fortress, that they are the good guys, that they're fighting the good fight. Because if they are proven wrong, then that is terrifying. That is terrifying, and it will be basically an existential problem for every single Russian without the nationality, with disregard to their essentially beliefs. And you ask me how I know that? Well, because there is plenty of Russians that already do this. A lot of the more progressive Russians and more democratically leaning that actually have realized that and have tried to fight it, for example, for a long time, they already feel it. I wouldn't say every day, but quite often a lot of Russians that I meet, they come up to me when they find out that my wife is Ukrainian. They explain to me, with tears in their eyes, they say basically sorry. Sorry. And like they have nothing to do with Putin. They are against him. They, for example, left the country years ago. They've been only posting, opposition media, propaganda, not propaganda, but Navalny's media, and trying to resist Russian state as much as they could. Each of them still feels that this is their own problem. This is their own world that is now causing so much pain. And we need to understand that this is exactly the situation that all of the other Russians want to prevent from happening. And I'm not a psychologist, right? I'm just telling you that this is what other peoples are saying, like other psychologists, and this is what I'm seeing with the people from Russia that I talk to around me. So they want to be lied to. And one of the things to understand how propaganda lies to Russians, and more importantly, I even think there is even better point to discuss here, is how Russian propaganda lies to us, right? How we, even knowing that what Russians are saying is propaganda, we are still buying into this propaganda. And this is something that poisons us every single day. Is the propaganda is driving the focus. Because what is we saying? Let's think about what we're discussing, right? We're always discussing like what is shown on the Russian media. They're always saying, it's like, hey, the situation around Mariupol. Wow, you see, we're bombing the shit out of them. So that's the situation around Mariupol. Hey, we're gonna encircle these Ukrainian troops on the east, and that's why that's important. So they always want to show these small scales where they have victories, because if you just stop for a second thinking about this and then zoom out, there is no strategic way forward for the Russians, right? There is no way they're going to be able to capture the territory. They know that the Ukrainian attack is imminent by now, and it's coming. That's why digging in. But they are trying to focus on these small battles around the front lines, around the tactical movements, where they're crossing the river, where they're like fighting the troops, where they capture like 5 Ukrainian soldiers. All of that doesn't matter because the Russia is already lost. But this is basically how the Russians, also coming back to the previous point, this is how they're deceiving themselves. They are thinking that yes, maybe like we backed up from Kiev, but we're still fighting in the east, right? We still can encircle something and so on. And it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter that much that it's already doesn't decide anything, that it will not change the war, that it will not guide the effort, like that capturing these couple of new settlements is not solving any major strategic problems with this war. Right? It doesn't matter because these are small victories that keep their hope burning. So, we have been talking that Ukrainian offensive is coming. But what will it mean and what will it mean that how hard it's going to be for Ukraine to essentially kick the Russians out? And it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard because Ukrainians, while they're going to have some battle groups in the beginning, but they definitely agree that they want to mobilize somewhere up to 1 million population. And right now, this is a war of attrition. And Ukraine is going to win this war. And it's going to win by only one and most important thing, which is capitalism. Because capitalism in the sense of that the US has said, we're going to produce weapons for you if you're going to use them. And the Ukrainian, the same capitalism that held Russia basically on float for so long is now going to bite them back. Because before, no one wanted to break deals with Russia and wanted to basically pacify Russia because, hey, in a capitalistic world, like if we break contracts, it's going to hurt us a lot. Right? But now, basically, new type of economy is emerging, is Ukraine war consumption economy. So there is going to be a lot of weapon manufacturers that are going to be driving a lot of the economic growth in US. And German weapon manufacturers are saying the same things. They're saying, sell everything. Like Rheinmetall is just saying, yes, just take it. Just take any armor. Just give them any armor. We're going to produce everything more. We're going to make everything new because they smell money. And if they smell money, we all know how much in Western society, if a big military corporation smells that there's a lot of money in the air, how much eager they want to fulfill this contract. So I believe that in the long run, Russia cannot win this war just because it's going to be just too much profitable to supply weapons to Ukraine. So the West will do it. That doesn't matter the politics anymore. Doesn't matter because it's useful. And with Russia now being tied with the sanctions and not having a lot of good production facilities running, they are very much now far beyond the point of any kind of salvage. There is currently hidden mobilization that is happening in Russia, but it's a very low-scale mobilization, right? Because what Russians want to do is they want to mobilize, they want to get people to start digging in the territory that they captured in Ukraine, to start building fortifications to help defend it. The problem is that they started doing this too late. A lot of this is not necessarily going to be in time to actually when the Ukrainian offensive will begin, because the Kharkiv offensive is already pushing some of the supply lines, so they're pushing towards the east, and the south is even with fortification, is going to be super hard to defend. And a lot of the Russian mobilization is going to be basically people with Kalashnikovs and very, very old equipment. Their equipment is super old, and as I say, if it's going to be like already by now, Ukrainian has a lot of manpower, and now that manpower is being put on a lot of the equipment, and there's going to be even more equipment that's coming for Ukraine. So Ukraine will liberate a lot of the land. I'm pretty sure almost all of the land. One thing that I'm still not sure of is Crimea. There is analysts that are saying that Crimea will go to Ukraine. The others say that it will not go. I want to believe that it will, but I don't know. And with that, we need to understand why Ukraine would do this, because this obviously will be hard and it will cost a lot of the Ukrainian lives. Why there will not be Minsk III agreement again. There is a narrative of Ukrainian nation that is being, every nation has some kind of a building legend, like a legend that is like forming legend, like a foundational legend. And the foundational of Ukrainian nation has been born before. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine was very much like a object mentality, right? People in there felt that they were like a toys in arms of the mighty and powerful, the Ukrainian oligarchs, the Russian oil companies, the Russian government, the Western government, the Western oligarchic power, the Western big companies. There was always someone else pulling the strings, and it always felt that Ukrainian people and the parliament were just always you needed to belong to one of them if you wanted a success in the Ukrainian society. With this current war, this changed. We saw the birth of a nation, and with birth of the nation, the most important point that defined it was the fact that Ukrainian society and Ukrainian people have ended this object thinking. They became the subject of their own future, of their own dreams. What does this mean is that as a subject, Ukrainians are the one that needs to define their own future. And with the Russia being aggressive, and they saw that contracts with Russia basically meaning only to the prolonged conflict, they see this war and this current effort as the only chance that they're having to kind of put Russia into its place and say the word. And there is pretty much a very strong push to the fact that we need to end this now. If we just negotiate peace, if we do any kind of negotiations, we're gonna basically just leave this war to reignite somewhere later down the line. There needs to be a period put into place now. All the sacrifices needs to be made now. There is a new unspoken contract, if we've been talking about those in a while, that's now been signed. It's been already signed by now with the Ukrainian society. It says, whatever the cost, we need to end it now. And I believe that by this contract, taking back Crimea obviously makes a lot more sense when we're thinking hey, maybe they will stop on the 24th of February. No. The 24th of February line, 23rd of February it's called sometimes. The 23rd of February line with the Donetsk and Crimea separate, that was when the peace negotiations could still come. That was when the there is still some kind of discussion about this and so on. After that came in Bucha, came in North Ukrainian cities, came in bombing of the cities, came in destruction of the Ukrainian culture, even more heinous talks about this. The destruction of Mariupol is a huge pain for Ukrainians. And all of my Ukrainian friends are saying just one thing: we need to end this. And this is the subject mentality that I'm talking about. So Ukrainians, they want this to be over for good. So, and it's now been the message of the government that this might take long, this might be bloody, but it doesn't matter, because by now there is such a huge push for it, and there is enough manpower. And if the West will not falter in deliveries of weapons, and I explained why they want, because of capitalism, then Ukraine will have all of the necessary resources to do that. And you might ask, but what about Russian defense? What about Russians defending the land that they're having? Well, here we need to understand that a lot of the Russian armor and their equipment has been basically on the front lines. They've been trying to advance and attack. They've been dragged through the mud and dirt and battlefields right now. And a lot of really good equipment, really modernized equipment, a lot of it, most of it even, have been lost in the first months of this conflict. By now, Russia is sitting on the pile of obsolete technology. Think about it this way. They are now getting off the shelves from their facilities tanks and APCs that have been produced in 1970s. 1970 to 2022 is about 50 years. So think about it this way. Imagine 1940s Germany fighting with tanks, right? And then their enemies fighting back with the cavalry charges, right? This is the scale we're talking about. It's the Russian tanks with no reactive armor, with no modern equipment, not really fully modernized, are fighting against kamikaze drones, fighting against long-range artillery, fighting against drones, fighting against night vision. It's gonna be quite a mess for the Russians. And definitely the videos that I've seen of them preparing shows exactly that it's going to be highly modernized, pretty much 21st century army that's going to be attacking. I wouldn't say it's a mid-21st century army, but it's definitely going to be a huge attack that's going to come Russia's way. And they don't have a lot. People that protect after you get past the first line, maybe second line, you get people basically with Kalashnikovs standing around in a field. They don't really have a lot. Of course, it will be costly, right? I'm expecting thousands, if not tens of thousands of Ukrainians dead after this attack. But this is where we come back to the fact that there has been this contract between Ukrainian people that they've been agreeing to, that this needs to be stopped now. And obviously the question that comes up is, well, what about nuclear? And I don't believe Russians will use nuclear. Firstly, we need to understand, will it be strategic nuclear? Highly doubtly, because if they fight strategic nuclear towards the west of Ukraine, well, the Western leaders have pretty much indicated strategic nuclear missile in any capacity will be the end of Putin. So there is that. And this is important to understand. People paint Putin as this maniac, that this is a person that has basically given up everything, that he's crazy enough to do this. But he's not crazy. He's very much fearing for his life, right? All of his actions in Ukraine, all of his decisions were extremely rational. They were built on the incorrect information that was fed to him, right? But if you base your assumptions on that incorrect information, then those actions are at least rational, right? If you also have an ego and ambitions as Putin, which he does, right? So it doesn't seem that he is acting as a madman. He wants to pretend that he is. He's sending his lackeys on the propaganda network, or his monkey Lavrov, to go out in the public and speak about nuclear annihilation. But when it ever comes to him, he's like, no, the action speaks that he will not do this. So no strategic. What about tactical nuclear missiles then? Well, firstly, tactical nuclear missiles, they are not as big of a threat as people paint out to be, right? By now, for example, Mariupol has sustained devastation of about a couple of tactical nuclear missiles. And tactical nuclear missiles are pretty much efficient only when there is a massive assault and a massive concentration of armor, which is not the war that Ukraine want to fight. And it seems that it will not be the war that Ukraine is going to fight. They're going to have those smaller, more agile groups. They're going to be advancing. So in that war, the tactical missiles don't really do that much. And obviously the use of them is going to be a critical step again in the political situation. So it's pretty much going to end Russia's state as any kind of world power, even the tactical nuclear missiles. So there is not a lot of battle advantage that they can do. Can they bomb cities? Yes, but it's just a terror attack. Right? It's going to be a huge explosion, yes, but it's not going to kill a lot of Ukrainians, yes, but it will not help the war effort. We need to understand that Ukrainians have already sustained, like their city of Mariupol has sustained essentially multiple missile strikes, like tactical nuclear missile strikes. And people, like, did Ukraine stop? No. Did Ukrainians stop? No. So why do we think that they will stop now? So there is no good scenario that would give Putin significant military advantage to use tactical nuclear missiles. Missiles do not capture cities. Missiles do not capture countries. Whatever Russia fires at Ukraine, it's just going to kill Ukrainians, yes, but it will not defeat them. And it will not defeat the army because they're not really that suited for the current way of warfare that is being fought on the east side of Ukraine. So what will this mean that Russia is hurtling towards its seemingly inevitable defeat in Ukraine? Well, I've talked about the Russian mentality. I talked about the Russian kind of the thief logic that while I'm not caught, it's all fine and dandy. And what's going to happen when the losses in Ukraine will become obvious is that people will start pushing in our direction. They're going to start looking for people to blame. And it's going to emerge as a personal trauma for a lot of the Russians. And at that moment, that personal trauma will start getting projected to the power inside of Russia. So I'm expecting a lot of centrifugal forces. But before it's going to start appearing, there's going to be a lot of, consolidation around Putin. So the more this goes forward, we might see a little bit of or significant consolidation of yes, we need to believe inside to our leader, to then when the devastation of their forces. And I think that the breaking point would be if Russia will lose the Crimea. If Russia will lose Crimea, that would be that breaking point for, in my perspective, for a lot of Russians. So they feel that Crimea is no longer even their victory. So even whatever victory they had before is now nullified. So who are they now? And I think that this is where actual Russia as a country will start breaking. With that, I think I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for listening. If you listened to this far, again, this is the first one that I'm due of these, and we'll see how it goes. I don't expect more than 5 views on this, but see you in the next one.